Wow, here we are. I think I did a video on planting fava beans, and now many of them are over a foot tall and they're blooming. I'm just out here looking at everything this morning and noticing some of the favas. Let's see, the light is probably difficult right now. Some of the favas have flowers that are quite high up on the plant, and others have flowers that are quite low on the plant. And because I had trouble with voles last year, coming along and eating my fava beans, I'm pretty sure that the ones with the flowers that are low on the plant, it would be easier for a predator to eat those, to reach them. I'm interested to see what I get this year. I don't think there'll be that much in the way of predators because it's pretty open when the weeds get cut down, which they will be before harvest time there. Meanwhile, I had a crow apocalypse. Almost all of my corn got pulled up and eaten by crows. So you see this one had 100% germination, and you can see that there's like nothing left. This is atomic orange. It's growing real short and stocky right now. Some survived. There's some. I guess we're just walking around the garden this morning. This is my squash patch. The squash here is pretty big, settling in nicely. A couple rows of tomatoes in. These are just like sort of random varieties. Lucinda is a green iteration on silvery fir tree, so it has this fancy spiky foliage, which I love. And silvery fir tree has a bush habit that I also quite love. Over here is Peruvianum. You can see it has like really neat leaves as well. Almost like holly, like the edge of the leaf is a different texture than the edge of most tomato leaves. And they make a green, firm, melon-tasting fruit, I am told. I got these from a friend in California. You can see there's some difference, like that one has different leaves than that one. I'm looking forward to those. Over here is the corn that's doing the best. This is Cascade Ruby Gold, bred in Oregon. It was the first one I planted, and so it was pretty big. The crows didn't bother it as much. I also hilled it up. I don't know if you can see, but I pulled the dirt up against the stems because I was hoping that would keep the crows from eating it. You can see where they got little patches of it. They would just pull it up. It was not my favorite. That's the tallest corn right now. If we go in here, I've got a row of squash along the edge of the corn, so it can go into this middle area that is untilled. Anyhow, if we go in here, you can see that some of these are tillering. That means they're sending up at least one more shoot from the base. In this case, there are two. And I'm not sure whether that's because I hilled up the soil along the base, or whether that's because they just want to do that. I would really like more plants that do that. But most breeders select away from it, except for, well, there are a couple folks that are working towards it, but I think that's neat. Over here is Saskatoon White, which is, you can see it's the only one that really didn't get bothered by the crows. I don't know why they didn't bother it. Right next door, that empty patch is a New York red, and you can see that that did get bothered, and they just didn't go next door and eat the Saskatoon white. I don't know if they don't like the flavor or what, but these are kind of neat plants. There seems to be a bunch of tillering. I held these up too just in case. They're very stocky, very, very broad stems, even though they're planted fairly densely. You can see I put some lettuce in here. A lot of the lettuce got disturbed when I held up the soil, so I lost a lot of the underplantings on the corn. But corn is here. This is just a row of beets down on the edge. And over here, that's the New York red. There's a couple plants, and then over there a couple more plants, and that's it. Under those boxes, egg crate or dairy crates, I put a couple of Gaspé seeds. And then I'm expecting that if the timing lines up, when I harvest those, they will be crossed with this New York red. We'll see. Just these rows of turnips, lettuce, and brassica carata, karaka, Ethiopian kale, and some beans over here. And this over here is my Gaspé. You can see this bed got more or less emptied by the crows. It had perfect germination. This one, I got some cloth over it, like that, sooner, so it didn't cause much of a problem. Oh hey, we have a little radish. I'm just looking at these plants here. There are some tillers, right? Little side plants coming up. So this is the fastest corn that I have, and it's my favorite. My plan this year was to cross it with all the other corns, but we'll see what happens. I have a second set that I planted here after this used to be Floriani corn, and it got completely eaten by crows. And then I've replanted Gaspé, which is a fast corn and might have enough time to ripen before harvest. So we'll see what happens with that one. I might do some crossing with that. Because Gaspé is so early, it needs pollen earlier after planting than most. So because I planted this one late, it's possible that it will need pollen at the same time as these other ones are producing. And I can do a cross. Over here, this was the atomic orange, which is just, it came up so nicely, and then just got demolished by the crows. I've interplanted it with some melons, which are not necessarily doing super great, but there are some. Tomatoes here in a row. And tomatoes are all saved seed from last year, pretty much. Yeah, the melon's just starting to get a foothold. This is a patch of Morden corn. And these are, this is Saskatchewan rainbow. It also got eaten by crows, but it's also not that big. And Assiniboine flint here. Again, not a big corn, It's kind of interesting because grow tomatoes. Over here, this is Homestead Yellow, so same conditions, but it's just a bigger corn. So I'm really interested to see how all of these look in the end. Over here, this is my block of promiscuously pollinating tomatoes. So they're originally from Joseph Lofthouse, and they're just starting to come into flower. Well, everything got planted late. Those are going to be some pretty spectacular shapes of flowers. And over here, this planting block is basically all the seed that I saved last year that I liked the taste of, and I mixed it in a big packet together. So I have no idea what any particular thing is, but of note to me, aside from all these fun leaf shapes that I've got going on, this one tomato plant is much bigger than the others, and it has a very open or exerted flower. Well, relatively open or exerted. So I think that might be something to save seed from this year particularly. All of these tomatoes are planted really tightly in close blocks like this, partly because they won't grow that big. I don't have a long growing season and they're not in a greenhouse, so they just don't get that big, but also so that they can cross-pollinate with each other. So this will be quite a tangle to navigate later in the year, but hopefully it provides enough habitat for pollinators to not have trouble going from one plant to another. Even the little tiny pollinators that'll go into a tomato flower, they won't have much distance to cross. It's one of the reasons I'm leaving so much weed vegetation around too. And then over here is Open Oak Party. So this one is growing really fast. It's supposed to grow really tall, and you can see, it's like 3 times the height of Saskatoon White. So it's just racing along. The crow's got all the edges. This where the straw is here is now potatoes. That used to be corn, and along this other row on the edge here too. You can see there's like 2 plants left in that row. So the crows started eating this, and then I covered it with cloth, and they ate anywhere the cloth met itself in the middle where there was a seam, and then around the edges, but I did save most of it, or a lot of it. So I'm really excited about that. I also healed that one up. And it just doesn't seem to be tillering as much, except for this one plant. Look at this one, it's like a bush. I love that. Over here, there is Painted Mountain. This is from Sweet Rock Farm. I got a whole ton because I thought I might be moving. You can see they're big ones. Those are the ones that survived the original crow attacks. And then there's smaller ones, and those got replanted. And they are just going. Like, this is such a vigorous corn. I am very impressed. Sweet Rock Farm. Very impressed with their corn. Meanwhile, down there you can see the parts that I couldn't cover because I didn't have enough of this floating row cover. I've put cucumbers down now, but there's like 3 corn plants, and the rest got eaten by the birds. So this used to be a much wider bed. Over here, Magic Manna. There's not a lot in here, but there's some. And it was covered, like I planted it into a covered bed. It's got, actually, it's almost the only thing that had spotty germination. It's also the only thing that got planted into a covered bed. Again, it used to be a wider bed, and so when it got eaten by birds, I planted this row of cucumbers. These are pickling cucumbers. And down there, there's a row of squash that I very late planted seed. I don't know that it'll do anything, but hopefully it'll contribute pollen to my mix. More tomatoes up here. These are actual, like, named varieties. I planted these in April 15th because I realized that I was not going to be moving. So I wanted to just have more tomatoes. So these are, you know, if these manage to actually set fruit, which I think they will. Look, got some flowers going. Wow, that's a spectacularly open flower. Oh, that's not helpful. Carbon. Oh, if I get carbon tomatoes, I'll be very happy this year. I wanted to do some breeding work with that one. Anyhow, if these manage to set fruit for me, I'll be impressed. They are all very short season ones, except for the carbon. This row on the end is breeding tomatoes, ones that I had planned to do projects with, and I might still do that. One of the ways I might do projects this year, because I don't know if anything in this row is necessarily going to ripen in time. If I take cuttings and put them in my hydroponic system inside, then I know that those will set fruit at some point, like they won't be killed by frost. And then I can take the pollen out of the garden here and cross it in. This is more late-seeded squash plants. These ones are doing spectacularly well. It's clearly much warmer here than it is other places that I tried late seeding my squash. It's a south-facing slope, so that makes sense. I would expect it to be warmer. Ooh, flowers. What are we? Moravsky div. A bunch of beans here. These are dry beans. So, soup beans, baking beans. I started with, a packet of everything, so this is a seed increase. Interestingly enough, the crows more or less left them alone. These are beefy. Ken Early on the far side there, and Brightstone is the closer one, the more dense row. And so this is this corn here is early riser. It was bred specifically for northern gardens to kind of pop up and go fast, and it seems to be doing that. I don't know if you can see. Those are pretty big corn. But the crows got most of it, almost all of it. So I interplanted it with Gaspé, and that's why it's covered. There's a little Gaspé seedling poking out that the crows managed to not eat. I mean, it would probably like to be let out of its cover, but I would like it to, I would like the Gaspé to not all be pulled up. This is Oaxacan green. Let's see what's going on under here. So again, mostly eaten. And then, so there's like the big ones and the little ones. The little ones are Gaspé. Little ones are Gaspé. The big ones are Oaxacan green. So there's not a lot of it. But if I cross it with the Gaspé, I'll have something to play with next year. This is more early riser. I didn't bother to interplant this. The only reason the cloth is still on this one is that it doesn't have any Gaspé to protect from the crows. But down at the end, I have my, Bouchard. There we go. Bouchard soup peas. So these little guys are little dwarf peas. They grow, maybe 6 inches tall. And I was worried the crows would eat them. And they are, I feel like they would be really good for interplanting, like planted between wheat and corn and things like that. So then you have your nitrogen fixer and your soup pea as just a growing system. This is my second seed increase. So you can see from that edge over to here is all one plot. And last year I did, I had enough seeds for a row, maybe the size of a quarter of that. And so then I planted half of the seed I got from that. And now half of that seed is this much, and I might have enough to make like one pot of soup and then save the rest to grow next year. And then next year I should have enough to start eating it seriously. So sometimes it takes a while to get enough to make a big harvest from a packet. On the other hand, if it looks like this didn't really need to be covered. It didn't get pulled up very much. There's still plenty, not under the cloth. So that's, I'm impressed by that. If I'm going to be covering the corn anyhow, I need to get a bunch more of this floating row cover, which I keep calling cloth, but it's called floating row cover. Just for next year, so the crows don't get it. And I'd like to get big squares so that there aren't seams down the middle. But it looks like it doesn't need to be covered. That's just some mixed peas, or mixed beans rather, with some dandelions or something starting. Lots of peas. I'm so excited about those. And then this whole area here used to be corn, but it got eaten by the crows, so then I planted potatoes, some late potatoes. I might not get very big potatoes, but I will get something out of that space. And I just covered them with straw because I don't want to dig them up. That seems like a lot of work. Meanwhile, over here, this cabbagey looking thing, there's a couple cabbagey looking things. That's cabbagey looking to my eyes, I don't know. There's some down the middle here. That's all gailan, which is a kind of they call it Chinese broccoli. It's got small heads and thick, yummy stalks. More beans. You can see the crows didn't pull up the beans, which really surprises me. This is Nez Perce bean. That's a patch of arugula that used to have corn in it. This over here is Montana Morato corn. So most of it got pulled up, and then I interplanted it with Gaspé as well. Might as well take a look under the cover. So that's a Gaspé. That's a Gaspé. And the weeds seem to be discouraging. So the bigger stems, again, are Montana Morato by Dave Christensen, and the little ones are Gaspé. The reason I'm crossing everything with Gaspé is because Gaspé is so early. It grows, I would say, reliably here. And so anything that I cross with it gives me room to play with selection, maybe having different kinds of corn that are reliable here. So along here, more corn, and this got, for some reason this field got eaten really badly. It was planted last, and then when it started to grow, the crows really got into it. And then they worked their way back towards the flint corns on that side. These are flower corns on this side. So I don't know why that is. They didn't seem to go after those other corns until they had eaten these ones first. These are some squash that were planted from seed because the corn got eaten. And I was like, well, I have these seeds, I might as well plant them. But this is magic manna corn. Then there's this patch of squash. Then this was supposed to be a mixed planting of different painted mountain corns from different sources. The problem being they all got eaten. Ooh. Okay, so these are tong ho. They're a chrysanthemum, an edible chrysanthemum. I love them. I just broadcast seeded some, so I'm super excited about that. They're coming up. What we got under here? So this was painted mountain from different sources, but the problem is that in order to trial it, I planted it in strips. So up here, I planted a strip, 2 strips from Salt Spring Seeds, and then down there I planted some from Glorious Organics, and then on the very bottom I planted some from Annapolis Seeds. And the problem with that is that you can see that the Glorious Organics and the Annapolis Seeds were kind of covered, but the Salt Spring Seeds were not at all covered. So I don't get to do a trial because the corn selectively got eaten by the crows. But I can tell you that the Salt Spring Seeds, painted mountain corn, started growing first. It germinated first. And the Annapolis germinated later, which you might think that's good or bad for it. But in this case, it was good because the crows didn't get to eat what germinated later. They went after the first stuff, and then I had time to cover it. So that wasn't exactly what I'm selecting for, or what I was trying to select for, but it is what I ended up selecting for. And then here we're back at Magic Manna, back at this first bed of Painted Mountain. And all of this, which any spot that has straw as potatoes, any spot that's just like super lots of growing things is probably, I'm going to call them weeds, but this here is lamb's quarters. It's probably my favorite green, not my favorite weed green, but my favorite green overall. Tastes kind of like asparagus. I've been trying to think about how to let it go to seed, but not necessarily let these cabbagey, mustardy, shepherd's purse things go to seed. I don't have an answer for that. I'm just going to come out and weed whack it at some point. Because I don't mind the lamb's quarters seeds at all. But I am not that thrilled with this, whatever it is, except that the pollinators do like it. And under that, there's clover. The clover I planted, I seeded. So if I weed whack this down, the clover should take over. But that was my morning garden walk. I try to come out here every morning and take a look at what's going on. Garden. 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 Yeah, not going as expected, but it's nice. It's nice to be out here. Hope you're having a good weekend where you are.